All right, so we're going to pick up here with the second video of this introduction to research, and I just added in the follow-up here. We ended up with hypotheses and creating a hypothesis, and basically one hypothesis that I could come up with from the Florence County project was residents of Florence County will support tax increases in an effort to improve recreation. Okay, so that's kind of what I thought might take place as we move forward with this project. That if when it came down to it, people would support increasing their taxes if it's going to help improve their recreation opportunities, as well as youth sport and adult sport opportunities. Okay. So the next question you have to look at is, well, who are you going to observe? And in this case, you have choices as far as who you want to see. Basically, you want to observe the people that have the answers. You want to get information from the people that matter. Okay, so one of the things you have is, okay, do we do the entire population? Do we do every single individual in Florence County and get information from them? Well, that's not practical. It's not realistic. You're not going to find everybody. Everybody's not going to participate. So what you try to do is get a sample of that, and a sample is kind of a smaller version of the population, and that sample is a representation of the population, and that's what you ideally want to get from your sample, is a good representation of your population. And sometimes one of the biggest challenges of research, and in particular our applied research, is how do we get a good sample that's representative of our overall population, and that's really hard to do. I won't lie, it's not an easy task to try to do so. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. Just understand that a sample is a representation, a smaller portion of the population. Okay, population is everyone in the group. Okay, everybody that is a part of that group. So when we look at a population, it'd be all of Coastal Carolina students would be a population. A smaller sample of that might be, a couple hundred students from all the different types of majors and representing all the different ethnicities and demographics, and because the idea is that smaller group is going to be representative of the whole group. Okay. How do we observe? So we start with, what do we want to learn? What do we want to get from those people? And so a lot of times, in our project with Florence County, we wanted to learn, what people wanted when it comes to recreation and sport. And so what we had to do was create an instrument. We had to create an instrument, basically a survey, to gather that information. Okay. One of the key elements is, with any instrument, is it valid? Does it really measure what it's supposed to measure? Okay. So is it going to give me the results that I need to answer my question? Okay. A lot of times, SATs, ACTs, basically, why do you take those? Well, they're give colleges a good idea how successful you will be in college. Is it accurate? There's a lot of challenges to the validity of it. Does it actually measure whether you're going to be successful in college? Or does it measure other variables, constructs that aren't really pertinent to how your success in college? A lot of times, one of the things we'll have is, there's not an instrument out there that we can use that's already been done, so sometimes we have to create a new instrument. I was lucky. I worked on a project before with another person, and we created this instrument for another place, and then we just shifted it over to Florence County, and we were able to use it for Florence County. So I didn't have to recreate the wheel when I did this project. I had to change the names and stuff, but I didn't have to recreate an instrument. But a lot of times we do have to do that in our field, because there's not already instruments out there to help measure that information. Okay. One of the things, interesting enough, one of the things that you brought up in your discussion earlier in our time together is the right brain and left brain activity that we did. Well, they gathered information, right, using that survey, and a lot of you challenged the validity. Does that really measure right brain or left brain with those 5 or 6 questions. Okay, probably they have done some validity testing to see if it does measure it, but I didn't see the results printed out there and anywhere. So there may be a challenge. You're right. There may be a challenge to the validity. Does it actually measure what it's supposed to measure? Okay. How do we observe? So what do we want to learn? We can do instruments. We can do observations. We can do interviews. One of the things we did with Florence County was we did the survey, and then we went to Florence County and met with citizens and different citizen groups in Florence County and did focus groups with them and did interviews and got information from those interviews. And then we had that additional information piece when we went back and wrote up our findings. So we talked about those. Data, when you hear research and you see research, data is just any of the observations. Any of the observations are called data. Okay, so every piece of information that you get is data from it and from your project. And data can come in various forms, numbers, categories, words, descriptions. It just depends how you set up your interview or how you set up your research to get and what information you need from them. Okay, so when we did our surveys, we were getting things that we could transfer into numbers. We can get percentages and information like that. When we did our focus groups, we got words, so we had to find themes that go along with those words and trends that went along with that and reported those. So that we're gathering information and gathering data, but that data took different forms and it impacted how we could work with that data. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing your research is it you want to do experimental or non-experimental. And so a lot of times we think the best research and the research we're going to do is experimental. Well, that's really not the case for us in particular. A lot of times our research is more non-experimental, which kind of is like, wait a second, aren't we doing research, so isn't it experimental? No, it's not really what it means. Experimental means that researchers give treatments. So treatments are some modality of change, and then they look to see if it does cause change there. So it might be, in medicine, it might be giving them a pill or a placebo, a sugar pill, and see if the condition they want to check changes, if anything different happens within the human body. Exercise science, their treatments are exercise routines or diet routines, and they see if that impacts the exercise and how the body can exercise. But a lot of times in recreational sport, we really, sport more with when it comes to the exercise and the dietitian and maybe some of the psychological approaches. We can do a treatment and then see if it impacts what happens on the playing field or practice fields. But a lot of times what we do is more non-experimental. Okay, experimental is going to require at least 2 groups, randomly assign people into each of those groups, and then we give the treatment or don't give the treatment. Ideally, three groups may even be best, where you give a treatment, give a placebo, and then give don't give anything. So the group that gets the treatment is called the experimental group. The group that doesn't get the treatment is called the control group. Okay? And basically what happens is you compare when you do your research, you compare your experimental group to your control group in one particular area, one particular variable, or you can do several. But the idea is that you're going to do those comparisons and see if there's a difference between those 2 groups. And you're hopefully trying to find cause and effect. That's one thing that experimental research can do, is help you get cause and effect. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. Okay? If you take this pill, you're going to get these results. That's what they try to do. Do this exercise routine. This is what's going to happen to you. Non-experimental research doesn't give treatment. So we just try to observe what's happening in a natural state. We'd give surveys. That's not a treatment. It's just let's get information from these people, and then we can use that information. Okay, so it's usually observed under normal conditions. Non-experimental research occurs when it's not possible to conduct an experiment. Okay, I'm gonna pause the video here and talk to you for a second. In an effort to determine if people are watching this video, I'm going to throw in for the rest of the semester a keyword, and I'll give you what the keyword is to create a sentence. At the end, when you do that last case study, all you have to do is write this sentence in, and you'll get 100% on it. Okay, but I want to see who's watching the video, and for this to work is if you watch this video and catch this, don't share it with others, because I want to see who is doing it, because you all had a decision to make, right? You can watch the video, or you don't have to watch the video. I can watch some of the videos, but not all the videos, right? And so I want to see who's doing what they're supposed to do and who is following that. So again, it kind of goes along nicely with what we've been talking about, is decision making and the ethics of it, saying that you're watching the videos when actually you're not watching the videos. So again, if you're watching this and you're seeing me say this, don't share it with your peers. The first word in that sentence when you do your case study is going to be decision making. Decision making is the first word. Okay? All right, well, let's jump back into non-experimental research. So surveys or polls, they describe the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. There's sampling, okay, so we can generalize it to our overall population. Sometimes we'll do census, and census is where you have everybody in the population. You're about to do that for the 2020 census. U.S. government gets, well, they don't get everybody. They get pretty darn close, and they don't have to generalize it. They got all the information from all the people, and so you can get some pretty good sound data. But that's why they only do it every 10 years, because it's really not practical, it's not feasible, and it's a whole lot of effort to get this. So a lot of times we just do samples and we gather information about attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, okay, and what have the people self-report. Other types of non-experimental research, case study, when you look at one particular case and look at it very much in depth and gather as much information. So again, one of the things you're going to be doing throughout here is case studies, but people do that as far as research as well, and look at one particular issue and write up about that and get as much information as they can. Longitudinal, looking at one group of people over a course of many, many years. One of the biggest longitudinal studies was done by the Harvard Medicine School, and they looked at heart-related illnesses and disease, and over a course of 50 years of a cohort of people. Correlation research shows a degree of relationship between two or more quantitative variables, basically number of variables that you can look at. In quantitative research, basically collecting data to do statistical analysis, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Qualitative, we're going to talk about that as well next class. Basically gathering data, opinions, attitudes, but you're looking for themes and trends in the words that you find. And historical is basically just using other people's research and trying to come up with it to help you answer questions and understand the past. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and stop here. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, keep looking out for the word, and we'll be talking to you next about quantitative versus qualitative research.